Hello, nation. Welcome to the Haven Nation Show, your destination for all things Lock Haven Athletics. I'm your host, Nicholas Severini, coming to you live from the Bear Country Studios, his basement in Avis, Pennsylvania, joined by my co-host, Ryan States. Ryan, how are you today?
Doing all right. We just got back from long 2 days doing, broadcast yesterday on no sleep from my end, so it was fun to go back, listen to Game 7 of the World Series. I made it to about the bottom of the fourth inning, I think, before I fell asleep, and then went from there. So
Yep, you didn't miss much.
No, it seems like I missed a pretty good game there at the end, right? Didn't miss much from Blue Jays fans' perspective.
Well, I will say this, I'm just glad as a Brooklyn Nets fan, I'm not the only one who is upset about a shoe size.
Yep.
Or two being too big or too small. Shout to Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, former Yankee platoon man with some pretty short feet, preventing what would have been one of the most craziest endings to a World Series game ever. A play at the plate, who would have thought? But, obviously the Dodgers won. That stunk.
It's a weird spot for us Yankees fans where it's like you don't want to root for the Dodgers because they're, the Dodgers and they just beat us last year, but you also don't want to root for the Blue Jays because they're a division opponent.
Absolutely.
One of the few games where you root for the Meteor, but unfortunately, the Dodgers had to win, and that's honestly probably the worst of the two options.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad for baseball. It's good. I don't know. I think it would have. I mean, I hope more teams play like the Blue Jays. Blue Jays, they play fun baseball, good fielding. Penn State hockey mug fell. We can't have that. There's a reason why it's on your side of the
Penn State
desk,
hockey.
By the way. Penn State hockey.
Only
right
team to beat Ohio State and Columbus this week, so we'll take that.
If you're just tuning in, this is the first couple of minutes where we just kind of talk about ourselves. This could be a normal 49-minute show and a little bit of a program update. We're going to preview men's basketball first, and we're going to do wrestling next weekend. Wrestling actually taking place right now. The Princeton Open has started. The dual schedule starting right after that. But a little bit about us. We are both insanely busy. When you reach November, I've noticed, Ryan, as someone who's done this for 8 years and 4 years professionally, this is when it becomes the dog days, where you're just scratching and surviving. I almost fell off my chair there. Trying to survive, as you can tell. But it's really that part of the season, isn't it, where it's just a slugfest. You've been doing it for 2-3 months straight, no days off. I've just completed my 4th broadcast in 5 days, so I'm absolutely exhausted. I can tell you're exhausted. Couple broadcasts in a row, road trip to Millersville, rather, which we'll talk about in a second, but this is where we got to be at our best, and that's what it's all about.
That's what you got to do, right? You got to fight through the tiredness, as, again, I did yesterday, coming back from that Jersey Shore game. Had a mouse in the apartment, so didn't go to sleep that night, so woke up, did an entire broadcast on no sleep. So got to fight through it, right? That's what you got to do.
Scratching and surviving. That's right. I think we should just get right into it. Scratching and surviving are the Bald Eagles. For the first time in 44 years, 3 games in a row in the same season, they defeat Millersville, a final score of 42-7. We only got about 20-25 minutes to discuss it because of the men's basketball preview, but I will say that it's very similar to the Shippensburg game. This is a Bald Eagle team. They came into the day expected to win, and they had it's another very buttoned-up performance to them. My first thing I want to discuss with the team is the consistency amongst it. They have a real identity on both sides of the football. Offensively, beating you at the pass game. They're back to what they did last season, and they're doing it in a very well way as well. And on the defensive side of the ball, bending but not breaking. They refuse to give up the big plays. They are totally content with you getting 3 yards of play. And they are trusting the playmakers on the defensive side of the ball to get turnovers. And in the case on the day at the Ville, the Bald Eagles did both on both sides of the field. Offense, they tore it up over there. Now defense, forced themselves within their own red zone a couple of times. They just made some great plays. Another very impressive performance. And despite being absolutely freezing out, the Bald Eagles providing the heat all day long.
They came, they saw, they conquered. And that's really all it was. I mean, when you win a game 42-7, that's about the best way you can describe it. They came in, Millersville was, as we mentioned, 0-8 on the season going into that game. Lock Haven 4-4. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They walked in. It was never really a contest. Like, there was never a point where I was worried that they would lose the game. They just ran them over and went home happy. It was a really good game for Lock Haven all around. Your point of the defense being okay, giving up 3 yards of play, is interesting because it feels like they are, because when it's 4th down and 1, they're going to get the stop. And we saw that a few times against Millersville. We saw it earlier in the season as well. I remember exactly. What was the game that was? Was it Westchester? That they stopped Westchester multiple times on the 1 yard line.
1 yard line and on 4th and 1 around midfield, and that led to the Haven scoring the go-ahead touchdown in that game.
And they did the same thing against Millersville, where Millersville had some chances from the 1 yard line at the goal line. They had some near midfield that they needed 1 yard and they couldn't get it. And Millersville was running the ball well all day. I mean, they finished with 170-ish rushing yards. I'll look at the actual number here. Out of 190 rushing yards on the ground for Millersville. And so they were running the ball all day, especially with their quarterback. But when they needed that 1 yard, Lock Haven made it about as tough as possible for them to get that 1 yard. That's really impressive to me.
I want to start on the defensive side of the ball because on my count, this is the most yards that an East team has gotten on the ground against this Bald Eagle defense. But that's because also that they attempted so many runs. 44 total rushing attempts. I look more at the average. 4.3 is also a bit higher than maybe they're used to. They had to deal with Tommy Hunsaker, a scrambling quarterback. They weren't sure if they were going to deal with him or the other quarterback that typically starts, who's a pocket passer. I think Hunsaker caused a little bit of a fright in the first half, but it goes back to that resilience. You know, the Bald Eagles, 5 turnovers on defense, a couple on downs, an interception, and a couple of fumbles. This team just and I think some people confuse turnovers as a bit of a fluke on a season-by-season stat, but it is a genuine plus for this team, their ability to get the ball going the other way. They are 3rd in the PSAC in interceptions with 11 this season. Only Cal and Westchester have more. And they're the middle of the park, right at 8 in fumbles recovered, but they also recovered 2 fumbles against Millersville. This is a team of dogs and a team of playmakers, and notably, they did all this without one of their 2 defensive captains, Rocco Doherty, and that means something. To allow less than 4.5 yards a carry and force 2 fumbles with your leading linebacker out, it's a very... Even against a Millersville team that's winless, still a team with talent. I was very impressed with the way they played.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned them having some struggles with the quarterback run. Millersville quarterback Tommy Hunsaker on the day, 16 attempts for 86 yards. He averaged himself 4.3 yards per carry. I think it was the thing of where you mentioned without Rocco Doherty. I think that changes if they have Doherty in, because Doherty, your normal Mike linebacker, would certainly help with those quarterback scrambles. But I also think it was almost... Lock Haven looked at it as, if that's what you want to do, and that's the only way Millersville could really move the football. If that's what you want to do, we'll let you do it. Like, if that's how you're going to try to beat us, go for it. Hunsaker on the day, passing-wise, 24 attempts, 12 completions for 69 yards, and a long of 10 yards. Nice. And only a long of 10 yards. Sacked 3 times. So there wasn't much that they could do other than run the football, and specifically run it with Hunsaker, although... Millersville running back Mekhi Ashby also had a really good day, 16 for 83. But I think Lock Haven almost kind of looked at it as, if that's how you're going to want to beat us, we'll kind of just let you have it. Because if you're not going to be able to throw the ball through the air, there's not going to be, you're not going to have enough time with all the points that we're putting up.
I think one thing I noticed, too, that's come to pass is that Millersville really tried to run up the middle a lot with the tailback. Isaiah Emanuel, who is their leading tailback, runs off the edges. He only had 10 yards on 7 attempts, but Mekhi Ashby liked to go up the middle, and it caused a bit of a fright, I think. Now, I will say, a real standout to me is the number of tackles from the interior defensive tackles. Most tackles in a game this season for Justin Castro-Dixon, he had 6. Blake Greismer, who had 6. Raheem Reed, who came off as a linebacker, he had 5. A lot of guys on the interior getting tackles, and I think when you're able to get comfortable with those sort of plays, that's only going to develop you as a player. I was very impressed specifically with Greismer and Castro-Dixon for clogging a lot of those holes, especially in the second half where Millersville did not run as comfortably. Off the top of my head, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure of the 190 rushing yards, they only had... net rushing yards. I'm pretty sure they only had about 46 rushing yards net in the second half, because I believe they had around 150 in the first half. So the second half, those adjustments and Greismer and Castro-Dixon clogging the holes made a real difference, Ryan, in that game. Are you about to pull out the stats?
I do have the halftime stats. I think these are the halftime stats. They are, so I can look here. I kept them with me. If we look at the rushing yards,
it's hard to see.
Lock
You'd think
Haven.
it'd be easier. Oh, the total rushing yards are up here. This is how we do it, folks. This is how we do it on the broadcast. You're getting a real look.
124.
Yeah, so, okay, not as good as I thought they did, but still I think pretty impressive. So 124 net rushing yards for Millersville in the first half. So less than 70 rushing yards in the second half. That's closer to their season average.
Yeah.
I think it was a very buttoned-up performance for them in the second half. And again, and it's a good time to transition into the next part of this, we keep talking about the second half making a difference, Ryan. This is another game in which they outscored their opponent in the second half, 21-7 discrepancy. And the only touchdown that Millersville had came on a miscommunication while they were running the second unit out onto the field. That wasn't the touchdown itself, but it took them about 80 yards inside the end zone, and it still took them 3 times to score. I keep being impressed with the way this team is resilient in the second half of games.
Yeah, and it's the same thing that they've always said. It's more of just a mindset thing in that second half of where they come out, and especially in a game like this, they were in control for the entire first half, and they just kind of came out and said, "We'll do exactly the same thing of what we did in the first half." They kept running the football up the middle. They found more success running the football in that second half. And they just let quarterback Jackson Ostrowski sling it through the air.
Well, let's talk right into the offense. I think that's a great transition. We have seen 2 PSAC offensive oh my gosh, I gotta tell you, they need to come. PSAC East Offensive Player of the Week odds in the last 2 weeks. Jackson Ostrowski last week, Justin Popovich the week before. You're gonna need to really make a case that Mekhi Watson doesn't make it 3 weeks in a row. Watson, 7 catches, a career-high 146 yards, and a career-high 2 touchdowns in the same game. And I think the play that really put the game away, early as it was in the second quarter, it was early in the second quarter, just their third offensive drive, after getting a turnover on downs.
On the goal line.
Towards the goal line, but it was a sack, so it backed them up to the 20. That's what it was. So, yes, you were right, Ryan. On the goal line stand, first play from scrimmage, Ostrowski, 80-yard crib call to Mekhi Watson. That ended the game. Watson continues to develop into one of the better receivers in the PSAC, and I am very much willing to call this trio now of Watson, of Roberts, and of Popovich amongst the best in the entire PSAC. The 3 of them all getting 2 receptions or more, but Popovich and Watson 5 receptions or more, and of course Watson, the real highlight maker on the day.
When you mentioned the 2 touchdowns through the air, there's also the 1 touchdown on the ground as well, which was Lock Haven's first score of the game. Mekhi Watson on a little jet touch pass ran it into the corner of the end zone for a score, and obviously that counts as a run. So he also has 1 rush for 13 yards and a score, and had another touchdown, if I remember correctly, on another jet touch pass that was taken away because of a holding penalty. So he almost had 4 touchdowns in that game. Yeah, I mean, Kutztown, they did put up like 1 million points on East Stroudsburg, so there might be one there that had a better performance. We haven't looked at the stats for Kutztown, but I think when in total, Mekhi Watson, you're having over 150 all-purpose yards, 3 touchdowns, along of that 80-yard touchdown pass. It's really hard to find someone who had a better day than him, although quarterback Jackson Ostrowski might have a case as well with how he played.
He's now at how many games in a row with 4 passing touchdowns or more? I'm pretty sure he hit that mark against Westchester, too.
No, because remember he had 5 touchdowns on the season going into the Shippensburg game.
Okay.
Had 5 against Shippensburg, and now he had 4 against Millersville.
But I'm pretty sure he had at least 2 against Westchester.
I think it was 2.
So you're talking, I mean, Ostrowski, he has a long way to make up because he had that injury, a bit of a slow start to the season. But Ostrowski has now thrown for over 250 yards of passing in 3 straight games. He's had back-to-back 300-yard games, 9 total touchdowns in that span. This guy is playing at his very best. When you're talking about we'll talk about Shepard in a second, but he is primed and ready to go here for the rest of the season. This guy continues to see our expectations and continues to raise them.
And that's also factoring in on that game against Millersville. The reason why it was so cold for us up in the stands where we were broadcasting was very windy. I mean, consistent winds of around 15 miles per hour. around the second quarter and on, wind gusts of up to 30 miles per hour. So when you're a quarterback and you're trying to air it out down the field, there was a few throws that we saw of Ostrowski's that kind of just got sailed on him because the wind ended up just taking it away. But despite having that work against him as well, ended up throwing 24 for 35, 24 completions on 35 attempts, 329 yards, 4 touchdowns, only sacked twice, and I think one of those was kind of just trying to extend the play as much as possible and ended up getting brought down. But there
weren't a lot of plays where it was free rusher, I'm in trouble, uh-oh.
Yeah, no, the 2 sacks were both on longer developing plays that the line just couldn't hold up, and that offensive line dealing with a lot of injuries as well. We saw the normal starting center kick out to right guard right tackle rather for the second half.
Golinsky?
Yep, because they're working with a lot of injuries up front. But despite all that working against him, Ostrowski had one of his better games of the season. You have that game against Shippensburg, the game against Bloomsburg that you throw up there as well. But he was about as good as he's been all year.
So every time we do this, look at the box scores, I always miss something during the game, being play-by-play, you being color. We're always play-by-play, literally play-by-play. So I always miss something that was a big factor in the game. Lock Haven had more yards to carry than Millersville on the ground.
Wow.
5.5 yards a carry and 176 rushing yards, and 2 halfbacks averaging 10 yards or more on the ground. Now, one of them was Chase Gorman. Shout out to Chase Gorman, by the way, who got his first rushing touchdown on his first attempt of a 32-yard scamper. But how about Kareem Hathcock? 6 attempts for 66 yards, 11 yards a carry for Hathcock. In a game where Green and Johnson held their own, Hathcock, I got to be honest, I missed that he had that good of a performance today on the day yesterday.
Yeah, because I remember he had the long run of 25, which was his first carry where he just kind of took it up the middle and no one was there to stop him. But I did not realize I didn't realize they rushed it that well because I think in the first half they ended with like 70-some rushing yards.
They didn't have a lot, actually. We have it in front
of
us.
We do have it here.
They had 58 rushing yards in the first half. So they rushed for 119 yards.
In that second
Apologies
half.
for the math. In the second half, they outran Millersville. And I think that's what really had them take control of the game. I genuinely think they could have had, 49, maybe even 50-something points. But I think they were most content with just seeing the game out on the ground, and the rushing game followed through.
Yeah, because when it was 28-0, that's when Millersville scored that touchdown because Lock Haven, up 28, started to throw the backups in. They threw the backups in right away, something we hadn't seen previously. Not from Lock Haven, we hadn't seen that, but Lock Haven.
Honestly, not just Lock Haven.
Honestly, when is the last time that we've seen Lock Haven put a full backup unit in a game because they were blowing teams out? Like, it's very rare. Glenville State 2 years ago?
Glenville State last year.
Or last year, yeah.
That was the last time.
Because this is a team that's all these games have been nail-biter finishes for the most part. Even Shippensburg, there was that, they're down 21 if they can get an onside kick and maybe something might happen. With Millersville, it was just, all right, we're up 28-0. Fold it up, let's go home. Like, it was that kind of, and then, there were some extracurriculars after some of the plays that ended up extending the game longer. I think the game ended up being, exactly 3 hours long.
3 hours, yeah, which is a little, usually you expect 2 hours, 45 minutes, so 3 hours is a little bit longer because of the penalties.
And, Millers, and again, we talked about, it's a good transition into the penalty things. We've talked about before
I was
how.
about to mention it, so start it off.
We've talked about before how Lock Haven, for some reason, when they play teams, take whatever their average penalty yardage is per game, add about 50 to it, and that's what you're going to see. And we saw that a lot more against Millersville.
13 penalties, 126 yards. And I think Millersville could have gotten momentum at points in this game, but just a back-breaking penalty disclosed that for them. And the referees were not at their best on the day. There were some controversial calls throughout. But yeah, it's not the first time we've seen it. It's not the first time we've seen it.
And so I did get confirmation because on the broadcast there was a play where a Millersville punt returner fielded a punt at about was going to field a punt at about his own 2-yard line.
Kick return.
Or was it a kick return?
Yeah, kick return.
Puts his hand up in the air. The ball hits him in the hand and rolls out of the back of the end zone. And you or I were both like, how is this not a safety? It's because he didn't have possession. That was the key thing. Okay. It was because there was no. He didn't try to catch it and then drop. I think the referees determined that he was trying to wave for a fair catch maybe, and when he was waving for it, the ball hits him, so it doesn't count as a football move, so to speak, so it doesn't count as a fumble. And then we had the other one where Lock Haven on a kickoff return, Ezekiel Johnson fields it at the 1. His momentum carries him into the end zone. He looks over at the referee, asks him, "Can I kneel this?" The head referee, who is in the end zone, says yes. So Johnson kneels it down. The whistle never blows. Then Johnson panics and takes it out of the end zone. Actually gets to, like, the 23-yard line.
It was a good return.
And then then we're thinking, okay, the ball's at the 23. Then the referees decide it's a touchback. Millersville challenges the touchback because it looks like Johnson caught it at the 1 and then walked into the end zone, which that would be a safety. And then they ruled it that, no, it was a touchback, even though the whistle never blew. So some things that lengthen the game, and a direct quote from after the game from the official to Lock Haven coach Joe Battaglia was, "Hey, I screwed up." Well, did not use the word screwed, but said, "Hey, I screwed up," because he told Johnson it was okay, but the field judge on the near side marked him down at the 1-yard line. So the field judge marks it a safety. The referee told him you can kneel it, so it kind of became a whole thing, but it ended up not mattering much. Lock Haven still kept the ball.
It could have mattered at that point, though, because it was 28-7.
Yes,
they were kicking off, so you could have gone to safety. It's 28-9, and you're giving it to Millersville 28. So it could have meant something. But in the end, I think Lock Haven deserved to have the result that they had.
Yes.
First 40-point game of the season, which is good to see. 42 points scored for the first time. Most previous was Bloomsburg, where they had 38. And before we move on, is there anything you want to discuss to close out this game, or are we good to go?
Good job with the passing unit. Millersville, the 4th best passing offense in the PSAC coming into the game. They were held to only 174 yards, and probably 100 of those came in the second half. I mean, Lock Haven did a really good job shutting down the Millersville pass game.
I do want to give one more nod, too. Shout out to Chase Gorman. Shout out to Evan Slystra.
Yep.
The jump pass is alive and well. Slystra, his first career touchdown as a Haven. As a Bald Eagle football player. Chase Gorman, his first rushing touchdown as a Bald Eagle football player. Archbishop Spalding's finest. Chase Gorman there on the carry. Good for him. But anyway, we move on because we were just talking about the offense.
Yep.
And my first prediction when we bring up this Shepherd team, their opponents for this week on Saturday, is that this is not a game that you're going to win 10-7.
No.
This is not something where you're going to have a slugfest, you're going to be nip and tuck and blah, 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 blah. This has to be a very similar game than last year, Ryan, where you need to match them point for point and you need to kind of beat them at their own game. The Shepherd University Rams tied with Lock Haven for 3rd place in the PSAC West. So and this is the final week of the regular season in the PSAC East, notably. So, Lock Haven, and this is true, can finish in 2nd in the PSAC if they defeat Shepherd and if East Stroudsburg loses to Millersville. Now, that second part
I mean, Millersville did find a win at the end of the season a few years ago, so it was that Edinburgh game. Or was that last year that Millersville won on the final game of the season?
Against Edinburgh,
yes. So they done it once. You never know. They could do it again. And ESU coming off of, I would say, a deflating loss, I think is a nice way to put that game against Kutztown. So you never know.
But back onto this one. This was the season from hell for Shepherd to start the season. 0-4. Frostburg State, who all of a sudden is actually a really good football team, they're now ranked. We didn't think that game was as good of a loss, I should say, as we thought. It was a 41-27 loss. You lose to Slippery Rock in overtime. You lose to Clarion by 2 possessions, and you lose to Kutztown. But, and
I would argue, those are not bad losses to have. Sorry to cut you off, but those are some good losses.
Since then, they've won 5 in a row. And I would argue, Ryan, very similar to Lock Haven. They've lost to who they were supposed to lose to. They've won with who they're supposed to win against. Millersville, 2-possession win. Westchester, a 4-point win. Bloomsburg, a blowout win. The one difference is East Stroudsburg. Yep. They have that 3-point win against the Warriors. And then Shippensburg, they blew the bricks off of Shippensburg 48-7, despite Shippensburg scoring the first touchdown. I got to tell you, Ryan, it's hard for me to separate these two teams in terms of how they play. They're very similar in that they're in the top half of the PSAC in terms of overall offense. As far as rushing offense is concerned, Shepherd is 4th, and that is a big discrepancy. As far as the passing offense, Lock Haven is better than Shepherd. Lock Haven is 4th. These seem like, I have to tell you, 2 very similar teams who have beaten teams they were supposed to beat and lost to teams they were supposed to lose to.
Yeah, and these are two. It's also very funny how Lock Haven the past 3 weeks, they were tied for 5th. They won that game against playing the team they were tied for.
That was it wasn't Westchester.
Westchester.
My apologies.
Then they were tied for 3rd. They won to move up to 2nd, and now they're tied for 2nd. So they are just slowly, week to week, continuously trying to move up the polls here. But the big thing for this Westchester team, you mentioned they've gotten better as the season has gone on. This is a team that Shepherd, yes, Shepherd. Coming into the season, Shepherd lost everybody. I mean, there was some guys last year that we thought, really good running back, really good receiver.
Really good linebacker,
yes.
Really good safety. I remember Miles Greer being just hauntingly good.
Guys that, if I am not mistaken, are now all at the Division I level.
Everyone that we just mentioned is Division I FCS.
Exactly. So really good players that deserve to play up at the next level. So in that game, all of those guys are now gone. Westchester lost, or Shepherd rather, confusing the Rams here. Shepherd lost a lot more than that. They was a completely new team, almost a very experienced head coach there in Shepherd, who's been there a very long time. They lost a bunch of their players, so coming into the season, it was like, okay, what's this team gonna be? Because we don't know. They've lost everybody. Then they start off 0-4, and there's a thread on the PSAC message boards called "Shepherd has regressed." Because everybody, especially that Frostburg State blowout loss, everybody was like, uh-oh, this might not be good. Frostburg State turns out to be pretty good, and then they went on a run. Clarion is better than a lot of people expected, so that loss does not look as bad. And then losing to Kutztown and Slippery Rock, guess what? So does everybody, except Gannon, apparently. But so those losses don't look bad. This Shepherd team has gotten better every single week. This is one where I wouldn't be surprised if Shepherd is a favorite in this game, even going on the road. This is a really good Rams team. This is a big game for Lock Haven, but this is not a team that's going to be like Shippensburg or Millersville, where it's just going to be an easy win. This is going to have to be a fight.
I can recall Shepherd last season, who regressed a lot to end the season, but going into Lock Haven, this is a team that barely allowed any points, conceded less than 10 points a game. They wound up finishing with still one of the best defenses in the PSAC before, as mentioned, regressing, losing to Bloomsburg. That was a really bad loss for them last season, losing to East Stroudsburg late. This season, I think, the fair thing to say is that the defense is not as good, and I would argue Lock Haven played a big part in kind of plugging holes into that defense towards the end of the season. For those of you that were not there with us last year, probably the most insane athletic event I have ever called in my life. Shepherd would defeat Lock Haven 45-38. Shepherd were up 35-0 at the half.
Yep.
And then Lock Haven made it all the way back to a one-possession game, and they were going to get the ball back when an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after the play to make it 4th down gave an automatic first down. Shepherd ran out the clock from there to win. But I can envision a similar game than last year in that high-scoring, close violence.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a very fair 3 words to assess what I think this Saturday is going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at how Lock Haven has done this season against teams. Lock Haven and Shepherd now, they've played very similar opponents, so you can kind of look at that matchup and see who's got the advantage, where both teams ended up blowing out Shippensburg. Both teams close games against East Stroudsburg. Westchester won. Lock Haven lost on a goal line interception. Both teams blew out Bloomsburg. Both teams won very close games against Westchester. Lock Haven performed better against Millersville than what Shepherd did. Both teams blowout lost to Kutztown. So these are two teams that are about as even, I think, as it's going to get. Both teams coming in hot, coming off, multiple wins in a row. Lock Haven on a 3-game win streak. Westchester on a 5-game win streak. So these are two teams that it's going to be a really close game. Or Shepherd. God, I keep getting those two confused, man. But no, Shepherd. Make sure we get that right. Both teams are very good. Both teams very similar. This should be a really close game.
Can I give a red flag?
Yeah.
Losing record on the road. I don't like that. And
something.
Only one convincing win on the road. Millersville was a one-possession game going into the 4th quarter.
Yep.
That's not good.
No.
And that is not at Shepherd's level. Bloomsburg was different. Maybe Bloomsburg was where they set it up. And now you beat East Stroudsburg at homecoming, a game that they were blowing out East Stroudsburg, notably going into the second half. It was like 26-8, I think.
Yeah.
Then you blow the bricks off Shippensburg. You do what you do. So maybe I am making a mountain out of a molehill, but I think that's something that it's like, 2-3 on the road? Barely beating Millersville? I don't know, but that's one thing that stood out. Okay.
I don't chalk up that Millersville lost too much, and we can get into some other stuff. I don't chalk up that Millersville lost too much because you have to think.
Win.
I mean, they were coming off.
It was a win, but it was close.
that Millersville game because they're 0-4 going into that game. Like everything is downtrodden. It got off to a slow start because they're feeling, they're not feeling themselves. I think that win is what ended up turning their season around. So I don't really chalk up that game being a close game because all the momentum was against them going into that one. Momentum also obviously against Millersville as well. But I think that was just one where everything was against them. They got a hard-fought win, and then that's kind of what propelled them to go in the rest of the way. But anyway.
Real quick run through for the personnel. Bucknell transfer, Michael Hardyway, is the Shepherd quarterback. I will say they do not pass it often.
Yeah.
Their backup, by the way, Tyson Bajent's brother, Ezra Bajent, is the backup quarterback, 17 for 25, so he's played a lot in garbage time. The two guys that return most notably are Jordan Barnett and Grant Swinehart. Backup, tailback, and fullback, respectively. Barnett is now the leading tailback. He's only 3 yards away from 1,000 yards this season. He is having an all-PSAC, an all-regional caliber season. That is the big factor, I think, in this game. We just mentioned this rush defense is elite, now third in the PSAC. It's going to come down to this rush defense. Hopefully Rocco is healthy. We don't know anything about that. But we need a healthy defense to really pull through. And with that, it's time for our predictions. Now, you are, Ryan, a perfect, and I am, myself, a perfect record of, how many games have we played? My bad. A perfect 9-0 when predicting Lock Haven football games this season. I am 7-2 against the spread, according to D2 Football Spread. You are 8-1 against the spread. Are you ready for this spread? Do you remember what I told you in the car? Because we were joking what the spread would be.
You said plus Shepherd 7.5. So Shepherd be favored by 7.5.
That is the spread.
Nice.
It is plus 7.5. So you know what? Me and IUP Big Indians on the same page. Shout out to him. I'm assuming it's a him. My apologies. No assumptions. Anyway, so plus 7.5 is the spread. Lock Haven at home, and this is the other factor before we talk about our predictions. First chance at a 6-win season since 2 years ago at home against Edinburgh. They wound up losing that game by 1 possession. They were never really ahead, though, by much.
A game that they attempted an onside kick, recovered an onside kick at 9 yards. Except at 9.5 yards, our photographer friend, Ashley, shout out to you, got a photo of it. They were past 10 yards. But we're not Patrick Beverly. We're not showing the photos to the referees during the game, so...
Would have appreciated it.
Yes, you would have.
Hey, if that happened today, it would have been overturned.
Yes, it would. You have the challenge now.
They're looking for their first 6-win season in 42 years. Lock Haven 35, Shepherd 31.
Wow.
I'm going for. Listen, I get criticized too much that I'm not.
Not Homer.
That I'm not a homer. I've been criticized by multiple people. I've been criticized. Some people think I'm on the other team sometimes.
True.
At the high school level. And this is me proving that I'm a homer. I have no reason to think this other than they could have easily won against Shepherd and completed that comeback, and I think they get the job done and they get that 6th win at home. Just like we said at the beginning of the season. We set it up that maybe that 6th win could have come at Shepherd. I am picking them. Give me Lock Haven. Give me the points. This is not a good team. This is a great team. And great teams cover. And great teams get them and take the points with them as well. I have the Bald Eagles by 3. What did I say, 35-31?
35-31.
I'm sticking with it. 35-31 Haven. Let's do it.
Alrighty. Well, so I made the joke that, Nick, you and I have not disagreed much. The reason you're 7-2 and I'm 8-1 is we have one game where we've disagreed on the spread, and that was East Stroudsburg. I said it was going to be a close game. You projected a blowout loss. It was a close game. So, you know what? To make it interesting, and because I really do think this, I agree. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to say 28-21 Shepherd. I think that this is a game where Lock Haven, they're coming off 3 in a row. They know what the stakes are. 6-win season for the first time since 1981. That's what the stakes are for this game. I was told by the Lock Haven offensive line coach, Coach P, playoff-like atmosphere, playoff-like mindset is what this team is going into this game against Shepherd. However, it's in the back of their mind, I think, as well. They know they can afford to drop this game and still get that 6-win goal. They have 2 games left. They're at 5 right now. They can afford to lose this game and, again, still have that 6-win be on the table. I think that Shepherd comes out strong early. I think it's very similar to that game last year. I think Shepherd has a big lead early on. I wouldn't be surprised if you look up and it's 14-0 Shepherd early on. Lock Haven fights their way back into the game. I think it goes very similar to the ESU game, where Lock Haven has a drive to win, and they come up just a little bit short. I'll say it's 28-21 rather. Shepherd wins. Lock Haven, they've got to delay that party just another week. This might be the first time that I am not being a homer and not picking Lock Haven, but I really worry about this Shepherd rush game. I really worry about what we saw against Millersville last week, because Millersville, not a very good run team, and they ran all over Lock Haven in the first half. Maybe that was Lock Haven giving them some of that. Maybe Rocco Doherty returning, who I was told was mostly precautionary, him being held out of that game. So maybe with him returning, that changes some things. But I just have a feeling that we're going to have to wait another week.
Ready to talk some ball?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Men's basketball preview for Lock Haven. We've got about 15 minutes to do it, so we'll do it. The Bald Eagle men's basketball team is in a transition season under legendary head coach Mike Nestor. To quote Doug Spatafor, the host of the Haven Coaches Show, Haven at the Hangar.
Shout out.
And that is all he does. He does notably, that's the first title on his resume.
Yes.
He's not really known for anything else.
Yeah, being the sports information director. For all three universities now, he oversees Lock Haven, Bloomsburg, and Mansfield. But co-host, host of a podcast. That's what comes first.
Well, he had. I'm sorry. He had a quote when I remember talking about this is 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I was asking, listen, what do we expect this year? That was back when both teams, we were creeping towards 500, yada, yada, yada. He told me, look, it doesn't matter who the players are. They will compete no matter who is on the floor. And I think that is really going to be tested this season. By the way, that year, first quarterfinal playoff game in a decade, a very long time that year. That was 3 years ago. Since then, the Bald Eagles have soared to highs unbeknownst to them. A share of the PSAC East regular season championship 2 years ago. Last year, of course, making a postseason again with a transition roster. And this season, they are in transition again because basically everybody from that team has either graduated or transferred.
Yep.
And that is kind of the big thing coming into this. You've got my opinion. Well, you have Eli Washington first, top 10 score in program history, graduating. You've got Isaiah Stewart, Lean Stu, who was such a consistent three-point shooter on the wings. Single-handedly won the game against Bloomsburg on the road, I can recall, last season.
Yep.
He was taking his leave as well. Even last season, even in losses, they were competitive. I can recall maybe one blowout loss against Westchester, but they were always competitive. But now we are in the college basketball landscape, Ryan, where guys don't stick around that often if they want different ventures. I'm doing notes for Delaware men's basketball, Ryan. 10 of the 15 players are transfers. 4 of them have transferred to 3 or more schools.
Wow.
That is the new era in college basketball, and that's what's happened to this lineup. Kevin Coleman, who is, I would say, the most important player, some would argue, on last season at East Stroudsburg now.
Yep.
Laquan Bird, who I fell in love with so quickly as a point guard for this team, reminded me a lot of Justice Schultz, now taking it up at Mansfield with former teammate Karsten Dominic. He didn't play last season, but I'm told is going to play this season for Mansfield, the Mountaineers. That's just 3 of the many transfers that this team has had. Gabe Springer going to Bloomsburg now. And I think what we have to see, and what I think, Ryan, is going to win you basketball games and set a culture is guys willing to buy in and guys willing to stay all 4 years. Because in that same game against Delaware is a Bucknell team in just the 3rd year of a head coach that won a share of the Patriot League title for the first time in a decade. And I'll tell you this much, Ryan, they didn't do it with transfers. I think that transfers give you the X factor. Transfers give you an edge. But if you want to sustain long-term success, you got to do it from the bottom up. And this is a team with a ton of young freshmen that are going to be tasked to doing so. And I think this is going to be a real test for this program and with this team this year. 11
new players is the quote from Coach Mike Nestor on the PSAC preseason polls when they were talking about Lock Haven projected to finish 6th, which was surprising to me that they were projected to finish 6th. We expected them to not get as much love because of the new team. But, yeah, 11 new guys on this roster this season, a completely new look. The only guys, notably, that are returning from last season, by my count, Mike Nouse was a junior last year. He returns.
Started, but was kind of more of a glue guy.
Yeah.
Started and played about 10, 15 minutes a game.
Dylan Scott also returns.
He'll definitely be an easy starter. Someone that'll probably play the 4. I'm just filling in the
No,
roles.
yep,
Play the 4. He could play the long 5, maybe.
Blake Deegan returns as well, which was a big one for them to get back.
That is the big one. I would say that's the leading returner who kind of is going to be thrusted to the 3 role and kind of become a do-it-all man, someone who is more of a spot-up shooter who snagged rebounds and made inward cuts last year.
Jack Hanna, the Central Mountain graduate, who has not appeared much in his time here at Lock Haven, will likely be tasked of maybe even being a starter on this team this season. And that also Chris Cornish as well, a freshman they got.
Did not play last year.
Did not play last year. A freshman they got is now on the team again as well. So that's it. That's all they have. Everybody else, it's a brand new faces, a brand new roster around this team, and that can be a good thing. We saw at times that Lock Haven team, they did struggle last year a little bit. They were not as good as the team that 2 years ago won that share of the PSAC East regular season title. Of course, it would have been hard to be as good as that team was because that team was really good. Talking about fights at Millersville. We're going to fight at Lock Haven against Millersville in that one. That team, really, really good. A team that was, in my opinion, robbed of making the NCAA tournament. They were one of the first few out. But this Lock Haven team, it's a very brand new group, and that can be scary, but that can also be pretty exciting with a coach in Mike Nestor who, if there's anything he is good at, it is getting the most out of what he's got.
Well, I'll tell you this much. And by the way, when we talk about this, just so you know, we know nothing.
Exactly.
We do not have insight. I don't want to know insight.
No,
I want to just do the game, blah, 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 blah. I'm just talking about Lock Haven because I love Lock Haven. Anyway, that being said, I think the transfers that are some of the new transfers, upperclassmen, have to step up. So the transfers that come in, Deuce Kettner, a redshirt freshman, I have him as a bit of a wildcat role. He's going to fill in at the 4 and the 5, maybe 6'7". I'm sorry to every kid that I'm sorry to the parent of every kid that just heard that, but I think he's a guy that can play maybe the wing, maybe drop down to center because there's not a lot of depth at center. But they do have one center, DeAndre Seaton from Virginia Union. He is a junior, and then you have your only Division I transfer, Blaise Angelotti out of St. Francis. St. Francis moving to Division III next season. Angelotti did not play much for the Red Flash. You have a community college and then D3 transfer, Dean Coleman Newsom. And then you have a senior transfer out of New Haven to Lock Haven, in Keith Warren. What I see with this team is a ton of wing, a ton of guys that can play the 3 and the 4, and not a lot of experienced ball handlers, and maybe 1.5 centers in DeAndre Seaton, who's an out-and-out center. Deuce Kettner, I think, could play that role. Maybe we can see Dylan Scott and maybe even Blake Deegan fill that role in. But I think the biggest question mark, Ryan, early is establishing who is going to play in the backcourt for this team. Are they going to give some of the freshmen another? There's 7 freshmen on this team that we'll talk about in a minute. Are you going to rely on Keith Warren and Dean Coleman Newsom to play? Because genuinely, I think, Ryan, the 3 and the 4, positionally wise, are good enough to make the postseason. But I'm wondering about the 1, I'm wondering about the 2, and I'm wondering, outside of DeAndre Seaton, about the 5, who's going to fill in the gaps. And I think when you're looking at the non-conference season, the backcourt and who fills in at center is going to be the big factor with how far this team can go. According to the polls, they think this is a playoff team.
Yep.
If they're a playoff team, I think the backcourt and the 5 needs to be questions turned to answers.
Well, the one I'm looking at here is the junior guard, Dean Colson Newsom.
D. Coleman Newsom.
D. Coleman Newsom.
Run DCN. Yep. I don't know if I can really say that.
So when he was at Chipola, started 13 games last year, made 30 3-pointers in that season and scored 171 points. So this is not a guy that's scoring a whole lot. Starting 13 games and only shooting 33-pointers or only making 33-pointers tells me this is a guy who's maybe more of a slashing guard, maybe a slashing 2, who can run the shooting guard for them. But the question is, who's the point guard for them? Is it Jack Hanna? Hanna, a guy who's, the redshirt sophomore, who's been here for a few seasons. He's not gotten his time yet. Is now the time where they try to let him run him at the 1. He has appeared in 4 games for Lock Haven, has yet to score a point that's not from the free throw line. Scored free throws last year against Millersville. but he's not a guy who's seen a lot of the court, and that's kind of the scary part with this Lock Haven team is a lot of guys who they were backup transfers at other places. They didn't start much at Lock Haven, guys that really do not have a lot of on-court experience, and it wouldn't surprise me if in the first few weeks of the season, this is a team that you see they're running new lineups out every week as they try to figure this out.
I think this is a team that is going to be looking for mostly someone at the one quickly. I think Keith Warren and Dean Coleman-Newsome are more 2 and 3 guards. Keith Warren, you were just talking about Dean Coleman-Newsome's three-point career. 3 collegiate seasons, he has 124 made three-pointers. That's not nothing.
Not a lot.
That is not nothing. Averaged only 5 points a game with New Haven. Obviously, he's going to be put into, in my opinion, a bigger role. I wouldn't be surprised if those 2 transfers stand out. To me, though, the biggest question mark is what Blaise Angelotti is going to do. 5 games for St. Francis, Division I. He's used to a Division I mindset. Bald Eagle area graduate. I think this is a guy that the fans can fall in love with pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you have that local kid returning home. Obviously, wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those guys that, with the announcement that St. Francis was dropping from Division I to Division III, decided to move on elsewhere and ended up coming a little bit closer to home to Lock Haven. Lock Haven about 30-ish minutes away from Bald Eagle Area High School. But Angelotti is one that's going to be really interesting, a guy that they will need him to be a three-point shooter. If they can have him run the 3 with Scott at the 4, Scott we saw at times last season was able to knock down some three-pointers, not consistent with them, but able to get them when the team needed them. Wouldn't surprise me if we see a duo of Scott and Angelotti, but also Mike Nouse, another guy who was a really good three-point shooter for Lock Haven last season. He's now a senior forward. Does he see some more starting time, or do they keep him in that super 6-man role that they had him last year?
And I do want to give a note to the freshmen before we make our predictions for this season. So there's 7 freshmen. You've got Deuce Kentner, a transfer out of Millersville. Then the true freshmen are Mike Green out of Plymouth Meeting, Devin Nelson out of Lansdowne, Pennsylvania, Byron Pinkney, a forward out of York, and rounding it out, you've got Tommy Kelly, who's a forward out of Collegeville, Pennsylvania, and Springford High School, the home of Ash. Shout out to Ash, of course.
Yes, shout out.
Somehow I forgot her last name.
Lawson.
Ash Lawson. I don't know how I forgot that. Luke Kenevon, a freshman out of Shaming, New Jersey, and Jake Manigault out of Abington. Now, I have done my research. And the name that stood out to, and again, I don't know anything. Maybe he never plays. Jake Manigault's name stood out to me more than anything. His coach has told newspaper, gym rat, team leader. All he wants to do is win. He couldn't care about stats. If you're talking about guys that can maybe play the one position, I don't know if you hand the keys to a true freshman first game of the year, but I think if you're looking for a point guard, you might have to turn to some of these freshmen, if not some of the experienced guys on the roster. And Manigault was the guy that stood out to me doing my research.
And we saw that last year with Lock Haven, right, with Laquan Bird. Bird, obviously not tasked with being the starting point guard right away, but was a guy as a true freshman on a team that we weren't sure many freshmen were going to play. Bird made his name known almost immediately. He came out, he looked really good right away, and now he's at Mansfield because of the performance he has. So we've seen this team have some success with true freshmen before. I think this is the year where they're going to have to turn to a few, and I'm pulling up the men's basketball preseason polls where we get ready to do our predictions here, but I would not be surprised if we see some more freshmen get some run on this team, especially as the season goes on, depending on how the season goes. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple true freshmen find minutes on this team.
So I want to do an over-under. And I don't think team success is going to be the key for this season. I'm not saying that as a cop-out. I truly mean it. When I'm looking at where Lock Haven can finish, there are 9 teams in the PSAC East. 6 make the postseason.
Yep.
I'm going to set the over-under 7.5. What place do they finish in the PSAC? Do they finish 7th or better, 8 or worse?
Over, I think they finished 7th.
You think they finish right at 7th, outside?
The PSAC East is so hard when it comes to basketball. Westchester is always really good. Shepherd is really good. Millersville has consistently been good over the past few seasons, as has East Stroudsburg. Mansfield was the one that was projected to finish 7th in the poll this year. I think that's insane. I think Mansfield is a team that I wouldn't be surprised if they finish 2nd in the PSAC East this year.
Westchester and East Stroudsburg are a different level. I think
that's third.
I had
maybe
them finishing 4th or 5th around the middle of the park.
I'll say maybe 3rd. I'll get a little aggressive. I say they maybe finish 3rd. I think this Mansfield team, and apparently a lot of money got into that program. That's why they were able to get guys like Laquan Bird away from Lock Haven. I think Bird is such a special player that I think he'll be really good for the Mansfield Mountaineers. If I remember correctly, that is their mascot,
correct,
the Mountaineers. So I think that, if I'm projecting Mansfield to finish higher, I've got to kick somebody down a peg. I think the one that's got to move is Lock Haven. It's just, they won 15 games last year. I think this team is such a giant question mark. We just do not know what this team is this season. We really have no idea what it's going to look like. Again, they won 15 games last year. I say maybe they finish with maybe a record of 13-15 this year, maybe flip the record they had a season prior. There's just so many questions with this team.
My issue is that, okay, well, I'll say this. They're, in my opinion, absolutely better than Kutztown, who I actually had as the worst team in the PSAC. They were gutted by the portal as well. They weren't able to really replace a lot of them. I think it's going to be a very rough year for Kutztown. I have them ahead of Bloomsburg as well.
Yep.
The question is, I do not have them ahead of Mansfield. I think it's going to come down really to them and Shippensburg, in my opinion, for who gets the last postseason spot, because I do have Mansfield 5th ahead behind Shepherd. I'm actually pretty much in agreement with the polls with the exception of where Mansfield is. It comes down to whether I think it's going to be Shippensburg or Lock Haven in the final playoff spot. Shippensburg just retains so much of their talent, though.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of the seniors coming back for an extra season. And just in general, a little concerned about the lack of height that's on the team, but they can play small ball, and I think I'll have Shippensburg in the final postseason spot, Lock Haven right behind. But real transition year, my main focus here is just seeing how they develop throughout the year.
And that's the big thing, is this is a developmental year for Lock Haven. This is one where you're not really expecting to finish very highly. Maybe they do. Maybe they surprise some people, and they end up finishing 3rd in the PSAC this year, and they catch everyone by surprise.
Football surprised me, that's for sure.
The transfers click right away, and that's how it ends, right? But I think with this group, this is a year that they've really got to focus on developing guys, getting guys, in the right spots, find out who are your guys, your build-around pieces moving forward, so that in the next 2 or 3 years, you can get back to that contending for PSAC title. It's just it's so much different than women's basketball, where we know that entire roster and what they're going to be. We've just not seen 90% of this team to know what it's going to look like, so it's really hard to predict. But I was surprised they were picked to finish 6th in the East this year. I thought they were going to be much harsher. I think that says a lot about what they think of Coach Mike Nestor, and they think that this is a guy that has gotten Lock Haven to some 6 seeds with some really rough teams.
They owned that 6 seed for a very long time.
Yes, they did, and Nestor was good at getting the best out of what he had, and I think that will be the same again. It's such a new team that there's not a lot to go off of.
Only way to find out is to watch the games. That is our show. Ryan States, I'm Nicholas Severny. Jersey Shore playoff football back at Shamokin on Friday, and then we're at home against the Rams looking for that coveted 6th win. That's all this weekend. Again, for Ryan States, I'm Nicholas Severny. You've been tuning in to the Haven Nation Show.